people before him that proposed that. Essentially, no crime is too small. So when this is what's going on, people don't obey lawful orders. They need to be arrested. Ultimately, we're going to wind up in a scenario where no business or no potential homeowner wants to invest in Chicago. We can't let that happen.
The concern about the broken window policy in a lot of cases is that it disproportionately sent a lot of black and brown people to jail and to prison. You were the sheriff of a major county in this area. What about that?
Right. So the reality is that there's a lot of societal issues that played into who goes to prison. Absence of fathers in the homes, a culture that glorifies violence, street gangs that are not held accountable, that are allowed to get away and thrive for long periods of time. They're a magnet for all kinds of illegal behavior. So I'm not somebody that's going to apologize for arresting people that needed to be arrested. Probably, marijuana, sending years ago where we criminalized things like that on a level that maybe it shouldn't have been. But the violent crimes, destroying businesses, shooting at people, they need to be prosecuted. And I don't care what color you are.
Let's get to the broader issue that a lot of people have been complaining about this year, which is the disproportionate, in some view, attention by police toward black and brown people. Do you believe the police departments are inherently racist? If so, how do you fix it? If not, how do you correct that perception?
So I totally reject that. I'll tell you, having spent my whole life in it, I think if any group is suspect to some racial problems right now with law enforcement, it would be much more likely to be Latinos, just because they don't know how to assert their rights, oftentimes from the countries of origin. Whereas blacks, we have, when President Obama was in the state Senate, they passed the racial profiling bill. A lot of police officers, you can talk to them, they are terrified of stopping blacks just for that very reason, that there's potential for complaint. Most citizens that are going to be trouble are going to have their phone out videotaping the whole thing from the get-go. So I think that's totally wrong. We have 75% of the murders in Chicago are black on black. I'm sorry they're committing the crimes. It is the absolute truth. And, at the end of the day, there's a lot of societal issues at play. I've spoken to those in truth. Other people run from them. But the problem is not that police are going after blacks. The problem is that the criminals are getting away with murder and everything else. They only solve 1 out of every 6 homicides in Chicago. I mean, it's a joke.
Who is that a failure of?
Well, obviously that's a failure of Kim Foxx. Kim Foxx is a horrible prosecutor. She never would have been in the higher ranks as a supervisor or anything else. Yet she's elected state's attorney. She's funded by George Soros money. We know that George Soros, sitting in his New York mansion, sends a check that's going to get to Kim Foxx for one reason and one reason only, and that's to essentially disarm law enforcement and create this chaos. And he's been doing it all over the country and everything else. So Kim Foxx is not worthy of the job she holds, and it falls on her.
Sheriff Curran, with respect, Kim Foxx's opponent in the last election, his father spent 5 times the amount of money George Soros did in that race. How is that any better?
So I'm with you on that money is a problem in politics, no question about it. But that we're getting to that where you have to have this ridiculous amount of money to run for office. Her opponent, that was one of her opponents. She had a couple opponents. So the voters of Cook County may not have had the perfect choice in that election, but you're right, money's a big problem, and people need to wake up. They need all these candidates right here. Every one of us is blue collar. Nobody's a millionaire, what have you. We're all running as Republicans. We are fighting for the middle class, and that's what the Republican Party is, the direction we're moving in across the country. So I wish people would give us a new look.
And to further ask about the Soros connection, how is George Soros' money any different than the Koch brothers, the American Legislative Executive Council, and other groups that have been accused of rewriting laws and deregulating vast chunks of American society?
Right. So you have a valid point there on some level, but if you want to get to degrees, George Soros is, he's embraced communism. He says so. He's embraced all these societal ills. So he has a much different agenda than the Koch brothers. The Koch brothers essentially want laws written so that they can pay less taxes and that, they don't have to have as much of a government breathing down their backs. Far different than George Soros' endgame.
One more question specifically about looting. You've talked about your criticism of Kim Foxx. Of course, you're not running for Cook County State's Attorney. You're running for the U.S. Senate.
Right.
What in a minority position in the U.S. Senate can Senator Durbin do to help solve the issues that led to looting this city and other cities in the first place?
Well, you could begin with East St. Louis. East St. Louis is arguably one of the worst cities in the world when you look at it. I drove through it last week. Dick Durbin comes from East St. Louis. The fact that he could neglect his own town on the level that it's been neglected is ridiculous. And he's had the power. He's been in that number 2 role on the Democrat side for a long time.
What should he have done?
So, well, there's infrastructure that could have been brought. There's all kinds of programs. There's programs that could have been brought. The schools could have been, you could have helped with regards to funding the schools. The housing should have been better. You know, when you have 3 burned down lots in a row and they've all been standing in that condition for 20 years and left to lay like that, that's not a city that anybody would ever invest in. So there's all kinds of things that he could have done, helping funding law enforcement down there to help create a safer environment. But, you know,
what can you do in Chicago? This is not East St. Louis, Avi.
Right, but the same thing, what's happened in East St. Louis is coming to Chicago. So, you know, either we wake up or this is going to be a ghost town like Detroit. That's where we're headed right now. So we got to push back. You know, and I agree with you about the dark money in Congress. I mean, maybe the Koch brothers should be investigated. But if I was in the Senate, I'd hold hearings on George Soros, where his money's going, and what was the quid pro quo.
All right, Sheriff Curran.
Thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Just